Okay, this is our painting project for this week, and this is a photograph I took in Capertee Valley, which is a beautiful part of New South Wales, and a place that's quite often painted by good artists and famous artists alike. And this is a little bit of the Capertee River running through here. And you've got these beautiful escarpments on the mountains, which if you've been following me for a while, you know that I like painting. And these nice rich foreground grasses through here. Big dominant tree, which I like that as part of the composition. And the river just sort of meandering its way in through here. It's got that sort of S shape. Good aerial perspective, a big tree here. And then, set back in the distance, these other trees. So good lead in for the eye. So there's a lot to like about this as a little composition. Okay, so I've got our ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and I'll use a little bit of water just to loosen that paint up, because for our drawing we want it to be just a little bit more pliable. Like so. Now the first thing here is we've got the hillside here, which is probably our main feature. So I'm just going to rough that in. Now I'm not going to be too concerned if I don't get it in 100% exact, as long as I can get a reasonable approximation of it, which is something like so. It rounds out a little bit there. And then all this section in here is rocky escarpments up through there. Okay, so when we've got that in, we can then sort of come in and say, well, the base of it's around about through there. And in this section here, we've got, whoop, we've got a bit of a main tree that sits there, and then there's a couple of others around it there, and the river sort of appears there, then it re-emerges there, so it cuts off there, re-emerges here, comes that way, and then out, and here it comes into there, and then it actually runs out of that picture around about there. So that's pretty easy. We'll get that in there. We'll run in some other smaller trees in behind there. We'll give that a little bit of shadow. There's some little embankments there, which is nice. Okay, let's do step 2. I've just put out titanium white, more ultramarine blue, and some yellow ochre. So we'll get our blue, our red, and our yellow. And I want to block in this main tree is going to be my darkest dark, and a little bit along the river edge here. So we'll start off with our ultramarine blue. We'll go into the alizarin crimson. We'll add a touch of the yellow ochre. Okay, those three together make a nice dark as such. Okay. And just carefully now, I just need to create the shapes now of this clumps of foliage. Okay, now we can adjust edges and so on as we progress through the painting, but the more accurate we can get these shapes now, the better. Okay, got the main trunk coming through there. It's mostly going to be covered in foliage. And this one sort of flicks up that way, and then it rolls back over. And there's a bit of a gap to this one up here. Okay, it's going to be something like that. Maybe that's running out a little bit that way. Okay, and then we've just run the sort of the base of the trunk in there, and a bit of shadow on the bottom. Okay, so it sort of establishes our darkest dark. Everything else has to be kind of a little bit lighter than that. So I'll just add a little touch of the, actually I'll add a little bit of touch of the red. I just want to warm up a little spot here. So we'll just go a little bit warmer, just sort of along that river embankment there. A touch in through there. There's a little bit of dark in through there, dark shadow. There's probably a little bit in. And that's something that most of us as artists have wanted to capture, that and light, but a sense of aerial perspective and a bit of depth in a painting, I think, is something we all strive for. If you're a landscape, seascape painter, that is. Okay. So we're not painting trees there, just notice that it's about shape and value, isn't it? There's no real identifiable trees. I'm not painting branches and leaves and so on, but shape and values is where we get the most effect. Okay, that's good. So around that now we've got our mountain that we need to just put it back into the distance. So I'm going to add more white into that. Okay, and it's picked up a bit of the red, so it's gone fairly mauvey, but I don't want it too mauvey, so I'm going to add more blue back into it, and it's going to go bluey grey, just because of a bit of that real ultra dark from before. And I think that's about right. And what I'll do, I'll just test it next to these dark trees, and I think that's pretty well working. So I just need to work around the shapes of these trees and just shape up our mountain here. Okay. So I can break up that line a little bit. Okay, now while we've got the blue happening, let's get a little bit of this, so I need to go quite a bit lighter. I'll get some white in there to silvery blue colour. Let's just get a little bit of that there. There's a bit of a mention of it. Runs back that way. Comes in here. Now, of course, we can always change the shape of this by just how we paint in the embankment and so on. But we'll just get an indication of it down for the moment. Now. Next thing is probably going to be our sky. Now there's not a lot in this sky, so I'm just going to take a big chunk of white, and we'll take a little bit of the blue. And we'll just get the sky down. We're not going to put any real effort into the sky. Let's just get a little bit darker at the top. Okay, through there. And big brush. Don't muck around with a small brush with this. We just want to get the sky in. We don't want to try and paint a masterpiece with the sky. Mostly because the real interest is in the mountain here and the river. Okay, so just work around that. I'm picking up a little bit of that dark, which is darkening off the colour, but that's okay. Sky holes do tend to get a bit darker, a bit more intense, because you're peeking through a narrow gap in the foliage usually. I'm just going to lighten it back a little bit more here now. And notice that sky, I mean, it's blue and white, but there's been a little bit of that red and so on in my brush. I haven't cleaned the brush, and see that's just coming out there. So it's just adding a little bit more to the sky than just the blue and the white. this cool red with an earthy cool yellow, you know. Doesn't go a bright orange necessarily. So, but what I am doing is I am mixing those two now, and I'm creating an earth tone. Okay, mix of the yellow ochre and the red, alizarin crimson or permanent crimson, and I've got some white in there because we want this to be off in the distance. Now this is just blocking in, okay, because if you look at the photo, it's quite green pasture, quite lush. Okay, we'll get there. This is just the underpainting to get us to that place, because it's this ready underpaint tone, and it's a good earth tone as well. It will harmonise with the green grasses, trust me. Or if you've watched any of our shows before, you'll know that to be true, that it works beautifully together. And hopefully you've tried it. I know a few of you have messaged me to say that you've started painting your foregrounds, blocking them in with this approach and getting good results from it. So well done to you guys who are doing that. Okay, so I'm just going to work around there, just pulling the river back a little bit there, in just in that section through there. It was just a little bit too wide for what we wanted. Okay, I'll work around that foliage. Don't make this a perfect neat line along there, it's a broken line. You know, nature doesn't get a ruler out and measure things, so never should we, I don't think. Unless you're doing something architectural or something and you're really struggling with it. Okay. Okay, I just want to lose a little bit more of that river just there. I'm going to start to warm it up a little bit, so add a little bit more yellow and red into it, and as we get closer to the viewer, less white into it. Well, I think that brings us to the end of step 2, really, of our 3-step more method of painting. So we've pretty well got everything blocked in. I like the shape of this river that's taken on here, and I think we can work with that. I've probably brought this into more of a point here where it's probably a bit more open in the photo, but doesn't matter. So I think we're good to go. Now, normally what I'd do is I'd let this dry off and I'd go and take an hour break or so, but I think what we might do today is just press on, just to show you that you can actually work over this if you want to. So what I'll do is I'll start off with, I'll take my little palette knife, I'll add more yellow into that mix, okay, mix that around, and then I'll get a big chunk of the white, and we'll create that rocky escarpment tone there, okay, and I'm just going to use just the end of this palette knife here, and this little squared off one is quite good for doing this type of rocky type of escarpment work. So let's just work some of this in. Now you're not going to get this exactly the same as what you'll see in the photo. Don't be put off by that. Just go for the general sort of feel and approach to it. Maybe run one that way, like so. So what I want to do is just work that back in, just re-establish the shape, because remember we painted around the shape and we did lose our shape a little bit. Okay, so now's our opportunity just to re-establish that shape there. And that one actually comes down, that's right. So we bring that one down to this sort of spot there. It's all about just creating interesting little shapes and things, little treetops without trying to paint every branch and every leaf and the birds. You know, try and get the shapes right without the details. Now I'm going to apply that with the palette knife, but you could equally do it with a brush, your choice. So we want nice green in here, so we're going to go with blue, yellow. There's going to need to be some white in there because we're going to start off a fair way away, and just a little bit of the cad yellow and a little bit of the red. So this is our starting green. Hopefully we've got that right. Okay, you can see it's fairly muted. Just kind of what I want, but I think I need to just punch it up a little bit with that cad yellow. Okay, so let's just give that a test there. Okay. It's probably a little bit dark. You can see the difference between the underpainting there, which is, I did put a bit of white into. So, work that in there. A little bit just in there. And the base of that tree, and then we can come forward from there. Just add a little touch more cad yellow in there. Just see if we can get So I'm just mixing up different greens here now. I'm adding a little bit more cad yellow in, just playing around with getting a variety, because greens can be challenging, you know, to get the right variety and so on with them. But this is really just a field of green with cows and so on in it. So let's just come back into here. That bit there, but it's okay. Okay, I'm just going to go a little bit more cadmium yellowy in through here, just as the grass is around the river embankment there. I'm going to back into the section under that falls under the canopy of the tree, but you're going to have a bit of shadow in there as well. So you don't want it too bright as you get underneath the tree. And then again, we'll just break that tone up. Now, again, you could use a brush to do this, and you've seen me in other episodes where I've used a brush to put our grasses in like this. So you don't have to use a palette knife. Palette knife does take a little bit of getting used to, and I'm using it because I'm really pushing myself to learn to get better with a palette knife. So consequently, I've been using it a bit more lately. How's the way that little bit of river there now just sort of sneaks its head through there? I might just break that up a little bit just with some bushes there. It just breaks that line up a little, so it's not one predictable shape. Okay, it's good. Might get a little bit more yellow ochre into here. And there's no right or wrong way of doing this. It's a big field, grassy area. Some of it's in light, some of it's in shadow. And our job is to make it interesting, to create a field which is full of cows and so on, that is kind of interesting to the viewer, but is not the main subject. Because it's not. So hopefully you can see that underpainting now is doing its job of just working in harmony with the greens, because red is the complement of green. These trees in the background, we don't want them to do too much, apart from they offer a bit of scale, and they kind of set the scene, but they're not main players in this play. So I'm just mixing a mid-tone green, okay, and I'm just going to tap the end of that brush in for that, and let's just have a look at that. Okay, now for this main tree, I'm going to make that put some warmer highlights on there, but that's not too bad. And that paint's a little bit wet underneath, a bit of an advantage to our normal approach of letting it all dry, because with that a little bit wet, what I can do is just blur it in a little bit as well. Okay. So it's good. So I've got a little bit of shadow, got a little bit of that mid-tone coming through, and I'll pop in some highlights on that in a moment. And then these ones that are back a little bit, I'm not going to do a mid-tone and a highlight, so I've just warmed it up ever so slightly. So I've got mostly more of a highlight tone. Okay. Now normally I'd say that's probably too bright on the cadmium yellow side, but because all the fields are got quite a bit of it in, I think it's going to work. Okay. It's good, and we'll put a few little details in there, like some little tree trunks and so on. And now what I'll do is I'll get more of that cadmium yellow, just tap it on the end of my brush. And I need to separate this now from the other trees. Just mix it in. So I want a light orange tone, which is what I've got there. But it's a little bit dirty. Like, I didn't clean my brush very much, and there was a bit of dirt tone and so on, because I've been using it for the darker colour, which is all good. That stops it from being too bright. Okay, now I'm just going to drag it like that. A little bit of water came out, which has made it a little bit not quite right in there. And notice that they're all a little bit of broken light. I'm not doing one great big long tree trunk in there. It's all broken up by the foliage. Mix up a dark, and what I can see is First of all, I don't want that much paint on my script liner brush. So pull some of that out. And let me just put in some of these fence posts. Keep the kangaroos from jumping in. Yeah, right. I doubt it. Across there. There's actually a couple in the water there. And then they run up here, there, across there and that. So now notice they're all fairly randomly done. So there you go, folks. The Capertee River winding its way through the Capertee Valley there. Not a bad little painting. I'll sign this one, pop it up on eBay. So if you're interested in owning one or two of them paintings from the Learn to Paint TV, you can do that, and then you can have a closer look at what we've done. See the brush strokes in more detail. Well, there you go, folks. That's our Learn to Paint TV episode for this week. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have enjoyed bringing it to you. And have a go at this one. I think you'll find it's quite a pleasant little painting. It's got a nice composition. I like this sort of L-shape composition to it, with a sneaky view out to the mountain with the highlights on the escarpment. That's, you know, an approach or a compositional design that really appeals to me, and you'll see that in a lot of my paintings. But yeah, have a go at this one. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And make sure you drop by www.learntopainttv for all the episodes of Learn to Paint TV. And make sure you also drop by learntopaint.academy. And you can sign up there for a free painting course where I go through the Moore method, the 3 steps in more detail for you. And if you follow them along, there's 20,000 people have now been through the courses. If you follow along that simple approach, then you can learn how to paint in no time at all. And we've got plenty of people who think that they could paint, have learned to, just following the Moore method. So give it a go. Enjoy this one. Let me know how you've gone, and I'll see you next week.